Hey everybody, it's Dan. Welcome back and welcome to another review video. This time for the newly released Victrix Saxon Warband set that was released in conjunction with their also newly released Pillage rule set. I'll make a couple disclaimers here at the beginning of this and what will be several videos because this is going to be a brief but intense series in which we're going to be looking at all of the Warband sets that were released. All of these videos will be and are sponsored by Victrix because they were kind enough to send one of each of their warbands to us to take a look at together. So as ever, huge thanks to them for their ongoing support of the channel. I mentioned some other disclaimers that I'm going to make here too because I've been giving some thought over the last week to how I want to organize these videos, and so I'll make these same disclaimers here all at the beginning. First is that there are going to be 5 total videos, so there's going to be one for the Saxons, one for the Normans, the Rus, and the Vikings, and then I'm going to put out a 5th video on kit bashing between those sets because that's something we typically like to do on this channel. Is I like to do kit bashing between sets. However, I don't want the first review to be at a disadvantage in not having access to bits from the 4th review. So my solution to that is let's do all the kit bashing in one video released after these 4 reviews are done. So that's disclaimer number 1. And disclaimer number 2 is that I've been giving some thought to how to handle some of the sprues that already have full-fledged reviews on the channel. And I think the fairest way to do it is to basically treat each review as independent of all other reviews, by which I mean, in the Vikings one, for example, I have a full review of the Vikings set. I'm still going to review those sprues within that video, as though the Viking review doesn't exist, just so that the information is all contained within one place. I think I owe that to you. I think I owe that to Victrix, so that I'm not forcing people to like hop between various videos to source this information. So just keep that in mind. Again, I'm going to treat every review like it's its own separate new review and go over all of the details that you would expect from one of these review videos. So with all those disclaimers out of the way, welcome. If you're new here, a special welcome and thanks for clicking. What we're going to do here is we're going to go through and look at each of the sprues. There are a total, I think, of 5 sprues in this particular set from 3 different Victrix sets. We're going to look at all the bits breakdowns for those sprues. I'm going to assemble a bunch of the figures. We'll do some scale comparisons, and then I'll give you my final thoughts on the set. So that's where we're headed. So these Warband sets, for a little bit of context, again, are released for their Pillage rule set, and all of them are designed with, I guess, 2 points in mind. One is that they are reduced model count compared to their normal sets for a slightly higher per model price. And the main advantage that you're getting in these sets versus, say, just the regular Saxon infantry that you could pick up from Victrix is variety. Because in this case, while again you're paying a slight premium per model, you have access instead of just to one set from Victrix to 3. There are sprues in here from the Anglo-Saxon infantry, from the Dark Age archers, and from the Norman unarmored cavalry. So that's sort of the theory behind these sets. I think it's a great move. This is something that I've wanted them to do for quite a while. They've kind of dabbled into it with some skirmish sets that they had previously released for their Normans and for their Saxons. But some kind of like variety pack is what I've been looking for, especially for those of us who maybe play games that don't require a super high model count. It's not always appealing to, pick up sets of 60 models if I only need, say, 30. But on top of that, having some way to get multiple sets as a sort of like starter pack, as some other companies like Warlord Games does, I think is a really, really fantastic move. And a great way for me, as somebody who's like a proponent of a lot of these companies, to point to a single set, for example, to say, hey, you should check that out if you want a good idea of what Victrix puts out. So I mentioned there's 5 different sprues across 3 different sets. Really briefly though, let's talk about the packaging that it comes in. Because if you're not familiar, I usually make this disclaimer that they come in baggies, not boxes. And they're always very well packed. When I get them, I get them all direct from Victrix. Even when they're not sponsoring content, I purchase from the company directly. It's just easier. Their shipping is super reasonable, even to the US. And so while they come in baggies, which is great for like store displays, so you can see the sprues inside, I've personally, anecdotally, never had a single issue with anything breaking in transit. Yeah, if you do experience anything like that, my advice is just to reach out to Victrix directly. They're really, really good with customer service responses. So before we get into the sprues, one more thing I want to touch on here is that what you're going to get inside of the set will be familiar to those who've picked up more recent Victrix sets that all come with these schematics, diagrams. But what makes this particularly interesting is that, at least for the Saxons, this is new information. At least I'm like 90% certain that this did not come, and does not come, maybe it does now, in newer packagings, but this did not come in the original Saxon set. They had the old system of just numbering the bits, like on the back of the packaging here. That's how the Vikings came to. So I'm curious to see if the Viking, I assume it does, but the Viking set probably also has a newly minted schematic like this, which is really handy. It gives you a breakdown of all the bits, the numbers that correspond to the numbers on the sprues, and it shows you the different combinations that you can make, the different bits that work with different models to make it a little bit less imposing to put together. And again, I always make this same statement, which is that these are, in my opinion, more guidelines than anything, because I have found many combinations that work that Victrix doesn't necessarily recommend. But this is a good guide anyway, if you're looking for a little bit of guidance on where to start. So let's isolate some sprues here. So I mentioned there are 3 sets involved here. There's the Norman unarmored cavalry, which includes these 2 sprues here. There's the Saxon infantry, which include 2 sprues of warriors and 1 command. Again, we'll look at each of these sprues individually. And then there's 1 sprue of Dark Age archers. So let's get to it. I've got a whole page full of notes here. So let's start with the cavalry. And with the cavalry, let's start with the horses. So we'll do a shot front and back here, and I will do my best to make clear in terms of bit and model counts what I'm talking about. For the most part, we're talking about 1 sprue. However, in the case of the infantry, there are 2 sprues. So as I said, sometimes I hop back and forth between how many bits per sprue and sometimes how many bits per kit, but I'll do my best to try to keep it clear. So if I didn't state it at the beginning, there's 32 models in this set, and so 4 of them are cavalry, unarmored cavalry models. And so you can see here there's 8 horse body bits, which are of course broken up as 2-part horses. So they go together, and again the schematic will give you guidance on what goes with what, but it's usually pretty clear just from looking at the lettering what goes where. And Victrix does such a good job with horses. I'll just kind of move around the sprue here so you can see that the poses are incredibly dynamic, great detail on like bits like on the reins, even that the saddle is different, depending on the model. It's not all the exact same. There's slight differences like on the detailing on the saddles too, what kind of cloth is on them. It's really fantastic stuff. And again, even just in mixing and matching 4 horses, say you had 2 sets of these Saxon warbands, just from mixing the 4 riders with 4 horses, you can get a really huge number of combinations without even touching the bits involved. So beautiful detailing on the horses. From there, you've got 16 shields, which is interesting because there are bits on the rider's sprue as well. So it's just interesting the way they've laid these sprues out. So there's 16 shields, and again, I like categorizing things as best as I can. So 16 shields, and that's broken up as 4 that are these kind of Andalusian designs, or Iberian designs. So 4 of them here, and of course with Victrix, all the backs have sculpting, which I love to see. It's great for painting. So again, 4 of those Andalusian designs. You've got 3 flat kite shields. So 1, 2, and there's 1 more down here. And by flat, I mean they are perfectly flat compared to these, which are kite shields, but more Norman in design. You can see that they are slightly curved. So curved shields, there are 5 of those, and they actually have different designs. So there's 2 up here, 2 curved shields. And then down here there's 1 that doesn't have any banding around the outside. 1 more here, and then 1 more here, which doesn't have a boss in the center, but is also slightly curved. And then you may have noticed too that there are 4 round shields, so 2 flats and 2 that are slightly rounded. I've only seen these rounded shields in the early armored Saxon kit, so it's cool to see them here as well. So just huge variety of shields, which is great because you could use these for Normans, you could use these for Saxons, Vikings, Rus, whatever you want. They're really versatile that way. It's made deliberately so. And then you might have noticed there are some bits on the top and bottom as well. There are 4 cavalry swords, and these are beautifully sculpted, beautifully detailed. See a little detail in the sword hilt there. So there are 4 of those. There are actually 8 scabbards, and even these you can see a slight difference in the design on the scabbards, but still that really nice cavalry sword design. Sort of remind me of the Riders of Rohan sword, which I'm sure in turn were inspired by the historical designs, but from Lord of the Rings. So 2 of them, 2 per side, so 4 per sprue. Don't have any sword in the scabbard, and 4 of them do. And you can see there are knives as well, and there are six of these knives. Again, the top of the sprue and the bottom of the sprue kind of mirror one another, and once again, cool mixture of kind of Arab designs, and then some tassels. There are 8 tassels. So great stuff. So again, just even on the horse sprue, the fact that you got that many bits to play around with to complement the rider sprue is really wonderful. So let's move on to the rider sprue now. So once again, 4 horses, 4 riders, and this mirrors what you would get if you picked up the unarmored cavalry set on your own. I think you would get 3 each of these sprues. And that's what I love so much about these warbands, is not only is it a nice sampler pack in order to, get you acclimated to some Victrix sets if you don't have any experience with them. I think this is a really nice entry point for people to pick up some of these sets. But for me, selfishly, as a review channel, this is great because like this one set is allowing me to review 3 sets that I don't have on the channel, but it provides all the same information. So this is what you would get if you got the unarmored Norman cavalry set. So here's the rider sprue. Again, 4 riders on it. And you can see a ton of bits on this one too. No shields, but again, that's by design because the shields are with the horses. So 4 riders, let's zoom in up here, and you can see kept deliberately generic looking in terms of attire, but no chainmail or padding, as these are the unarmored guys. So this is great because it means you could use them for Normans, like I said, Saxons in this case, that's the obvious intent. But even like with your Rus, with your Vikings, because they are just kind of generic looking mounted Dark Age warriors. Right, so heads are interesting because you can see, obviously, I forgot to mention, but the detail is beautiful. I mean, from a production quality, everything's fantastic. And you can see some of them have like pouches already sculpted, slightly different like designs for the belts too. So they really are unique. That's something that Victrix does a great job with, is adding so much character into their figure design. But pay attention to the fact that 2 of them have just neck attachment joints for heads down here, and then 2 of them, this is something we see kind of exclusively with their Saxons and Normans, have the cut-off head design, which is cool because it allows kind of these nasal helms to have a real 3-dimensionality about them when you're gluing them down on top of the heads. So I'll talk about the heads kind of differently then. So these 2 bodies go with all these heads up here, and there are 12 of them. And I'll just kind of move across so you can look at some of the really beautiful face detail on these. So of these heads, 3 of them are bare heads. 3 of them have soft caps. 4 of them have helms, various Dark Age looking helms. And then 2 of them have Arabized helms, which is a Victrix term. I'm sure it's also a historical term, but not something I'd heard outside of Victrix miniatures, but it's these ones here, which could be used for like El Cid kind of campaigns. So really great variety of heads there, again, going to just these 2 bodies. And then, of course, you could then mix and match even further. We'll get to that in the kit bashing video. But you could mix and match heads from all of these other sets onto these bodies, too. And then, so these heads, remember, just need helmets. Right? The faces are going to stay the same. So you have 11 of these loose helms that could be glued down onto either of these 2 bodies. So once again, I'll just kind of move across the sprue so you can see the detail there. And all of them are nasal helms except for this one, which is just a conical helm. And you can see lots of different Dark Age designs here. This one more quintessentially Anglo-Saxon, I believe. This one more Norman, for example. And then there are 3 of them that, once again, are that Arabized design. So again, if you wanted to make like an El Cid style army, you have enough bits in here just from this sprue to make all of them look Andalusian, if that's something you wanted to do. Now let's talk about weapons. So there are scattered around the sprue, and again, I've done this a couple of different ways. I think it's best for me to just kind of move around the sprue and call them out. So there are actually 6 javelins. You can see some examples up here. I'll just kind of move around the sprue. So 6 javelins, 4 of those are in right arms, which are like in throwing positions. These ones here, and you can see some of them are slightly longer than others, slightly shorter than others, which I love, just the slight difference in size detail. And then 2 of them are in left hands, like this one here. So 4 right, 2 left. There are 6 spears, and it might be easier in this case to turn it sideways, because you can see that there are spears that are slightly longer than the javelin design. And there's some overlap here, like you could have a throwing spear, for example, like with this guy. So you do whatever you want. But 6 total spears. Some of them are upright, like this one here, and then some of them are in thrusting poses, like this one. Or this one's kind of couched, like he's charging. There are 4 swords, and remember there are an additional 4 like really nicely sculpted cavalry swords on the horse bodies. But there are 4 swords on this sprue as well, all in right hands. There are 2 axes, which you might have spotted earlier, here and here. And then in terms of accessory bits, you might have spotted, remember there's already some scabbards on the horse sprues as well. But you got 5 scabbards scattered around the sprue. Once again, slightly different designs, each of them, which I love to see. And then there are 5 little knives too, like sax knives of various designs and sizes. So just kind of scattered around the sprue. And then this one was curious. It had me confused for a second, but I believe that's an early mace that's being like strung up by just a little strip of leather, maybe to glue onto his saddle. But that's a cool bit to include. And there you have it. So really lovely, nice, versatile set, and fantastic to have this included inside of the Saxon Warband. Looks like next we're moving into the Dark Age archers. So there's 1 sprue of these for 6 total bodies. And we'll talk a little bit more about this at the end of the video too, in terms of the versatility that this affords. But this is something that I'll really lean on in both the Rus and the Viking video too, because those kits also include 1 sprue of archers. What's really interesting about this is that while superficially it looks like you can make 6 archers, what we'll see is that there's so many bits included in this that you can actually make up to 12 archers and 4 slingers. But we'll talk about that in a second. Let's just go through the front and back of the sprue here. So once again, there's 6 bodies. This is from their Dark Age Archers set, which once again I've not reviewed, but if you were to pick it up for yourself, I think it comes with 6 of this sprue, if I'm not mistaken. So again, we're able to review the Dark Age Archers set here too. So let's look at these bodies. Once again, like with the riders that we just saw in the unarmored Normans, nice generic Dark Age bodies here. There's 1 that's in padding, like a hauberk here, and then the other 5 are just in various Dark Age clothing. Some like looser trousers, some more tight looking, some with wrapped legs. So what it affords is, right, with different headgear, different shield designs, you can really represent a lot of different cultures and even really time periods with just this nice generic set, which I think is a brilliant move. So yeah, beautiful sculpting as ever, certainly on like the folds of the clothes, stuff like that, and the production quality is still top notch again. Very, very little in the way of mold lines, and the detail is nice and crisp. So 6 bodies here. Let's talk about weapons. Once again, I'm going to kind of rotate around the sprue. I alluded to it, but look at some of the designs on these bows, just how beautifully sculpted they are. And you might have spotted when we were looking at the schematic how dynamic some of these poses are. Again, some of the arm positioning kind of belies that. But yeah, I mean, nice, versatile set. So there's 12 bow arms. They're in various, knocking and firing positions, loading positions, at ready positions. This one's kind of like being held to the side. Some more down here. Pay attention to the arm length. That's really the only thing you need to pay attention to when it comes to Victrix sculpts, because some of them, like this one here, already has part of the arm sculpted on. So like a bow that's designed to go with this guy will have a more difficult time going on, say, this guy, without some conversion work being done. So that's really where the schematics come in to give you that kind of guidance. But if you pay attention to it, I have found you can mix and match stuff really freely. And we'll, again, play around with that in the kit bashing video to show off how I think a lot of these arms could go in with just like the regular Saxon infantry set. to make even more archers if you wanted to. But yeah, look at this. I mean, some of the detail in these poses, like the hand that's holding arrows and firing an arrow, would make for such a cool looking model. This one here, holding extra arrows in his bow hand. And that detail is very nice because we'll get to accessories in a second, but there are actually only 4 quivers. There's a little bundle of arrows too for 6 models. So to have lots of loose extra arrows kind of scattered around in hands and stuff really helps sell the illusion of this being a fully armed unit. So 12 bows, lots of nice poses, and a really cool looking design as far as I'm concerned on all the bows. And then there are 4 slings per sprue. Once again, lots of nice dynamic looking poses. 2 more over here. And a nice job in terms of like scale, because you know I like things slightly more heroically scaled, and especially when we're talking about weapons. So like a sling at this scale, like the rocks you'd be throwing would be like marble sized. So it's always nice to see them kind of scale them up a little bit, just for 148 to 156 scale miniatures, so they're a little bit easier to see and paint. So I like that a lot. A couple of loose weapons as well. There's just 2 of them on the sprue. One of them is this axe that's located up here. And then one is this large looking sax knife, I presume. Kind of looks like a machete, but it's just a big old sax knife. And there you go. So we got a number of accessory bits down here too. I think in total there are, across the sprue, I think I counted 13. So you got all these like axes and pouches down here. These pouches up here, which would be nice going with the slingers. I had mentioned already there are 4 quivers and 1 bundle of arrows, and there are actually 2 satchels down here for those slingers as well if you want to represent some more rocks. And then I didn't even talk about heads. Normally I talk about heads second, but I got so excited to talk about the arms that I didn't talk about the heads. So there are actually 20 heads on either side of the sprue. There's 10 up top and 10 down bottom. So I'll just show you the detail here while I tell you about the composition. So there's 10 bare heads, like this one here. You can see some examples here. There are 5 that are wearing caps, like this one. And there are therefore 5 that are wearing helmets, like armored helmets. And once again, a nice mix of different styles. And here's the other side. You can see some more examples here. So even within just the sprue, you've got a lot of variety you can achieve, but certainly then, because the neck attachment points are similar to most other Victrix sets, it means that you can mix and match with your other sets for even more variety. So now let's move into the Saxon, Anglo-Saxon infantry set. Now I can't remember offhand what the breakup is in terms of sprues if you were just to pick up the Anglo-Danish infantry for yourself. But I want to say it's similar to the Vikings, where it's like 60 models. So I think it's something like 6 of the infantry set and then 2 of the command set if you were to pick up the full Anglo-Danish infantry set for yourself. So in this case we have kind of a sampler pack. So we've got 2 sprues of just the infantry and then 1 sprue of the command here for a total of 14 models across these 2 sprues. So let's take a look at one of the infantry sets first, and then we'll take a look at the command. So once again, I've been giving you a lot of numbers that are based on sprue count. So just with that in mind for this sprue, if I mess up, just keep in mind that there are 2 sprues from this particular set here. So this is interesting because this really does mirror the Viking set in terms of, once again, composition, where that one had 8 bodies. Half of them are armored, half of them are unarmored. The key difference, just from glancing at it, is the inclusion of things like these kite shields. The head designs are obviously different. The clothing is quite different, especially in terms of footgear and leg like wrappings, which were a lot more rugged looking with the Viking set that we reviewed and then we'll re-review here shortly. But also there are no axes. There are a lot of spear options of various designs and lengths, which is cool to see. But those are my initial thoughts. So let's look at these bodies here, and I think these look so good. Once again, mirroring the posing that we saw with the Viking set and the breakup of armored versus unarmored. to represent, in this case, Saxons of different status, perhaps, wealth. You can make Hearthguard right out of the armored guys very easily. And then also pay attention too to the fact that two of these guys, we saw this on the Huskarl set as well. Two of the infantry guys have sculpted cowls like this and the flat tops, which mean they're going to have a different set of helms to go with them. But we'll take a look at the breakdown there very shortly. But yeah, I love the inclusion of like sax knives being sculpted onto the bodies here. Once again, going back to Victrix doing such a good job with character, right? Makes them really good for role-playing games, skirmish games, of course, to make individual like personalities. And the sculpting on the chainmail looks fantastic. So yeah, excellent, even without adding any bits onto them. I think the bodies are really good looking. Oh, there's one that has like padded armor here too, and the other three are purely unarmored. So 8 bodies, so you're going to get 16 of these bodies per set. And then there are, this is again kind of difficult to break up, but I'm going to wrap around the sprue here. So there's 14 heads that can go with 6 bodies, or roughly, because again, you can see like even this head has a slightly different attachment point from the others, but I think it actually goes with this cowl piece. So you'll have better idea from looking at the schematic, like what can go where, but you can see like this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one all have the same neck attachment point. So they're going to all be able to accommodate the same head. So I'll talk about these 6 kind of together as there being 14 heads that can go on those. And of those, 8 are armored. So like these ones here, wearing a helm of some kind. Most of them nasal helms, some like just regular Dark Age helms. And then 6 of them are unarmored, or with a cap of some kind. If I flip it over, you can see here like this head is definitely designed to go with this body because of the attachment point, that ball mount. Put a couple more examples up here. Now there are 2 bodies that we talked about that have the flat top helms, and those ones I don't have notes on, so I'm going to do this live, but it looks like there are 4. I got a whole page full of notes and I forgot to write down the flat helms, but it looks like there are 4 that go with these 2 bodies, which is fine. Again, you don't need too much variety there with 2 bodies. It's still a 2-to-1 ratio with these 4 different designs. And once again, there are more examples on the unarmored sprue, and there are actually a couple of examples on the command sprue as well, if you wanted even more variety for them there. Now, shields. There are 11 shields per sprue, so you can get 22 in the kit if you were to pick this up for yourself. And you can see it's a nice breakup of round shields, which are of different sizes, these banded round shields. And I love that Victrix does that, where even this one's like smaller than the medium-sized ones on the other side. Slight difference here too. This shield boss is kind of pointed versus this one, which is rounded. Something to pay attention to if you pick up those Little Big Men studio transfers is that the transfers are designed to go on particular shields. So you have to pay attention to that when you're kind of planning out models. But otherwise, I love that they do this, where even here, the 3 kite shields are actually 3 different designs. There's this one, which is kind of the teardrop shape. This one, which is a flat banded kite shield. And then this one down here, which is slightly curved, like in a Norman design. So there you go, a really nice variety of shields. Again, 11 shields for 8 bodies, so you're going to have 3 left over no matter what. From there, let's talk about weapons. So I mentioned there are a lot of spears. There's no Dane axes on the main sprue. No hand axes either, again, to help differentiate from the Viking set. But you could certainly kit bash with the Viking set if you wanted some axes. But I think that was a deliberate design choice here. So I'm just going to kind of rotate around the sprue. So there are 16 spears per sprue for 32 in the set. And you can see it's a really nice mix of different spear styles, lengths, like this one almost looks like a javelin, and different poses. So some of them are just upright, like this one. Some are overhead thrusting. Some look like they're in like a downward thrusting pose. Really, really excellent. Again, beautiful sculpting on it. So there's 16 spears per sprue. There are 7 swords per sprue, which are kind of scattered around in different places. But they're all nice, Dark Age style swords. Slightly different designs on those two in terms of like the taper, which is just such a fantastic detail to include. So 7 swords per sprue, 14%. And again, these can all mix and match with the other sprues as I keep talking about. And then there are 2 of these sax knives, which are really, really cool looking. Nice big sax knives. Both of them are in right hands. And then kind of rounding the sprue out, you can see there's some scabbards down at the bottom. There's actually only 6 per 8 bodies, which is not a huge deal because not all of them need to be carrying swords. There's one little knife down here. And there's one really nice big, probably the biggest sax knife in a scabbard that we've seen from Victrix outside of maybe the like Huskarl's set. Has some pretty imposing ones as well, but I love that. That'd be nice on like a character model. You can see once again some of them already have knives sculpted on them, but that's probably the biggest one that I've seen from any Victrix set, so really nice to have a couple of those in my collection. So again, 2 of this frame for 8 total models. And then rounding things out here, finally, we're going to talk about the Saxon command frame. So there's 6 bodies on this sprue. You can see a good number of heads and accessory arms as well. And it's funny because I haven't had experience with the Anglo-Danish sprue or Anglo-Saxons outside of the command. I picked up one of the command sprues years ago just to get access to some of these character bits. So let's look at these bodies. So I mentioned that there are 6 bodies per sprue. 4 of them are armored, and you can see the armor design is even slightly different. This one has this really cool looking scale armor. It would be great for a warlord of some kind. Right, and then 2 of them have cloaks with optional attachments over here. And they are optional. I can flip it over here. You can see there's this like kind of fur cloak design here, but even if you left it off, you can see how that would make for a nice kind of mini cape, which I've done on a couple of my models, but you could certainly attach some extra bits if you wanted to. There's one unarmored guy here, which would be great for like a standard bearer or a musician of some kind. And then very cool is the inclusion here of this monk guy, which I zoom in, you can see he's got a crucifix on his neck there in kind of monkly garb. And yeah, really fantastic detail as ever. So some great options there for some character models, if that's something that you wanted to use this sprue for, or just to round out some of your infantry sets or units. So again, 6 bodies. There are again a good number of heads. Let me just kind of go around the sprue so you can see what I'm talking about. So there's 12 heads within just this frame, but there's a caveat there, which is that 4 of them are these flat attachment points which go on either of these 2 guys' heads, or as I mentioned, you could use them in the regular infantry frame to kind of add more variety to those heads, or indeed on the cavalry set. So there's 4 of those. There are 2 heads that are designed deliberately to go with the monk body. You can see the attachment point is different, and these are clearly monks. So you got 2 options for that body, which is also good if you were to pick up the full set for yourself, because there are 2 monks, because I believe there's 2 command frames in it, so you can have 1 head for each of your monks. And then you've got 7 heads here. Excuse me, 6 heads here, which can go on these bodies down here. Looks like actually these 2 are designed to go with this attachment point, to be more specific. So again, you got this guy here that's unarmored, and these 4 heads, which are armored. They can go with these 3 bodies here. And I would wager that they would also go with this body here, just given that the ball attachment point is the same between them. There are also 7 shields on this set here. Again, there's 4 that are the banded round shields, and once again, slightly different sizes. Really large shield here, 2 mediums, 1 small, I think is what I would call it. And then there are 3 of the kite shield designs. Each of the different types, I guess, is represented. There's the flat one here, teardrop, and then curved flat shield here. And then in terms of weapons, this is where some Dane axes come in, because there's actually 4 on this frame. There's this one here, which is a 2-parter. Pay attention to the axe heads too, because like the bearding on the axes are different across the different axes, which is just such a cool detail. Different lengths on them too. This one here, and then this one here. So really, really great to see those included up here for some command figures, or as I said, to mix in with your infantry if you wanted to. There are 5 swords just scattered about. And then there are 8, what I'll just call command bits. And again, I'll kind of move around the sprue. You can see there's this thing here, which is clearly designed to go with the monk. Either of these arms, really, to go with the monk. Down here, you've got a couple more command options for, banners, standard bearers. This one is cool. It's a 2-parter that has, 2 arms attached to a very large banner pole. A couple musician options, and then a club over here to go with that monk, if you'd like. And then 6 scabbards at the bottom for really, realistically, 5 of the bodies, but I guess the monk could have one too. And there you have it. So that rounds out the kit. So this is going to be a long video because I don't know that I'm going to be able to edit much of that out. So at this point, let me break here. I'm going to assemble some miniatures from each of these sprues to see how they all go together, and then we'll do some scale comparisons right after that. Alright, so I assembled some models here. I did not do any kit bashing. I mentioned at the beginning of the video I'm going to do a whole separate video on kit bashing between these sets. So I'm just assembling some miniatures straight off the sprues. This is one from the command sprue. Also from the command sprue. Combination of monk options. And here is one of the infantry sprue guys. Make kind of like a hearth guard, I guess. And probably the best evidence that I can give you for my claim that the schematics they provide are helpful, but really just guidelines at the end of the day, is that I didn't consult them at all. I was just kind of going on vibes, and I didn't find any combinations that didn't work. Again, just pay attention to attachment points. That's the best advice that I can give you, is that if you do that and just look for arm lengths that match the shoulder attachment on the bodies, you're going to have a hard time finding combinations that don't work. So here's one from the archer's sprue. And another archer. Again, I can tell just from looking at the pose that I don't think these arms were designed to go with this body, but I think they work just fine. Right, so you can achieve so much variety from these sets if you're just kind of thoughtful in putting them together. And here's one of the riders. Again, there are 4 of these in the set. And I think, God, Victrix does a great job with everything they do, but their cavalry models in particular are just so impressive looking. It looks like, still out of a movie. And for something as humble as a light cavalry figure, that you can have such dynamic, action-oriented poses is really, really fantastic. Let's throw them in the Lazy Susan. I want to see how these scale up with some different manufacturers. Alright, here we go. So I've got all the infantry models anyway on the Lazy Susan here. And you can see that some different manufacturers and ranges are listed on the bases of the white primed figures. But otherwise, the models that you see that are bare plastic are all the ones that we just took a look at and assembled off of the sprues. The Victrix figure that you just saw pass there, if you were curious, is from their Rus set. Again, we'll be looking specifically at some kit bashing in that 5th video, but I'll give you some idea of height. You can see, as far as I'm concerned, I think Victrix scales kind of perfectly in between the historical ranges and the fantasy ranges. Sort of a midway point between those. So what's the final verdict? These are beautiful models. I mean, Victrix does a really incredible job, but as a Warband set, I think it's also incredibly successful because of the variety that you can achieve, even with miniatures just straight out of the pack. It's really, really impressive. As I said, we're going to do a whole separate video on kit bashing, and I can show off kind of what you can achieve by mixing a lot of these sets together. But even these figures, as they sit off of the sprue, are really not only beautifully designed models, but you have a great variety just from the sets as they're designed to go together within this set in particular. I also love the concept of these Warband sets, not even just for kind of like skirmish level games like Pillage, but as kind of sampler packs for Victrix content. I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if somebody says to me in the future, hey Dan, I have no experience with Victrix, what would you recommend? It probably will be one of these starter sets, to be honest, just because they provide a great glimpse into, in this case, 3 different Victrix sets from their Dark Age range. I really do hope they expand this concept into like their Ancients line, maybe even their Napoleonics for some skirmish level games there. It's a great concept, and one that, as I said, I hope that they continue with. So in terms of where this one sits among the other Warband sets, I really can't tell yet because I haven't reviewed those yet, but in terms of content, this one is pretty top tier. It's going to be hard to unseat, I think, from my favored position. So really knocked it out of the park with this one, and I'm excited to review those other sets. So appreciate all of you for dropping by for this one. In the meantime, as I said, we got 3 more reviews and 1 kit bashing video probably to be released in short order here. I'm trying to get them done before the end of August, so we'll see if I can achieve that. But as ever, I appreciate you all, and until next time, happy gaming.